The following was recorded during the COVID-19 pandemic through Zoom meetings in accordance with local health guidelines.
So it was the summer before my senior year of college, which is a unique time to get any sort of calling in life. I was studying to be a history teacher, and I planned on coaching football at the high school level. And I was working my summer job at a factory with my father in Canton, Ohio. And I felt a call into ministry. I had done some campus ministry. I didn't have any clue what I was doing, but God had blessed some efforts. I started a Bible study on our football team and even did some small group stuff on campus. But then I just felt like God was saying, no, it's not teaching. I want you to share the gospel. And then through that, God reminded me that there was a sports ministry program at a school, a local university in Canton, Ohio, and Dr. Greg Linville was there. And so I graduated with my degree in history and then went right back into school and secured a really good internship in sports ministry at one of the local churches there, actually the church I grew up in. And I learned about ministry at Malone University under Greg Linville and got my start in student ministry and in sports ministry at a local church. And I've been doing that ever since.
Welcome back to another Ministry Misfits episode. I am Andrew Fouts, and this should be episode 8, assuming that my count from last time is still accurate, since this is part 2 of our discussion with Dan Stoffer, talking about a lot of different things, and we've honestly got a few more episodes that we can do now coming out of this discussion that he and I were just talking about. So today, though, last time we talked a little bit about walking through the idea of figuring out your calling. We looked a little bit about the fact that just because we think we have our calling figured out doesn't mean we actually do, and that God's going to continually surprise us, sometimes I think for his own amusement. But today, though, we're going to start looking into Dan's history, well, not really history, his past 18 months or so, working as a church planner in the midst of a global pandemic that the world has not seen in the past 100 years. So, Dan, welcome back.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. What a great topic.
Right. It's nothing relevant or anything. This is old news by now. So where we left off last time, you have, walked through your calling a little bit. You have gone from being a history teacher hopeful to eventually becoming the interim pastor, trying to, stop the bleeding of your home church, to being all the way down in Tampa, Florida, doing the same sort of thing, thinking you're coming home only to be 3 hours south in Columbus and working with the church there. And now all of a sudden, God has again told you you're not quite on where the calling was as far as the initial one, because now you're going to go out and plant a church. So let's start before COVID. Let's start back. You've gotten this position with this church to be a church planner in residence. And typically, those of you that don't know how church planning goes down, this is a good place to start as well. Yep. Church planning is not just a group of people get together and say, hey, we're a church now. There's a long process that goes into all of this. We're not even talking legal process. We're just talking spiritual process here. Typically, the first place you start is you look for a couple other people for leadership. And then within that leadership, you go and find a couple people that are willing just to walk with you and start some Bible studies up. And then, from the Bible studies, you get into community outreach. And from community outreach, you get more Bible studies. And then eventually you have enough Bible studies to say, okay, now we meet Sunday morning at this time.
Yep.
And we just fellowship together. And then, okay, maybe we start taking an offering. And okay, now we start writing a constitution up and doing all the legal fun stuff that the U.S. government requires for churches.
Yeah.
How much of that process did you actually get to do?
Yeah, not much of that. And so when we first started to meet with our launch team, behind the scenes, there was a demographic study happening, and basically, I was able to preach a few times. I think it was in January and February, so right after I was hired. So the congregation at large got used to me and then heard about this vision, of course. And we just invited people. If you're interested in being a part of this, learning more information, and then come to these meetings. And we did a demographic study on where we're looking to plant in Gahanna, Ohio. The reason why we chose that area was it's growing and there's opportunity there. Columbus, Ohio is a really neat place right now. It really is thriving, and there's lots of opportunity, lots of people that need Jesus too. And so in churches like ours, I'm part of what's called the Restoration Movement. So it's independent churches of Christ or Christian churches. There hadn't been a Church of Christ Christian church in that area in 25 or 26 years. And so there's some prayer, demographic study about the potential. Even though there are some large churches in the area, we just know in a 5-mile radius, there's thousands of people that we could reach. And so we did all that stuff. We just started to cast vision, and then the pandemic hit. So we hadn't started groups. We hadn't done any service projects. All those things were planned. We had hoped to, so that was February. We had hoped to have our official launch Sunday in the pre-pandemic world by late September of that year. And so we would have done the typical, big grand opening, big marketing, all that kind of stuff. But the pandemic hit, and for a few weeks, I was kind of scrambling, doing what a lot of people were doing, Facebook living in a private group, just trying to keep people still engaged, still excited. But then when it was apparent that this thing's going to last longer than 15 days, all right, this is going to be a big deal. It's like, okay, what's next? And so,
for those of you outside of Ohio, it was March 23rd, 2020.
Okay.
Is the date that the governor said, okay, everybody, the stay-at-home order was put in place. You had said March 15th was the last day you had preached there at the church that you guys are serving with.
Yeah.
So 1 week later, now everything is locked down. What was the initial start date that you guys had kind of thrown the dart at the calendar and said, okay, this is the day that we launch?
Yeah, I think it was the end of September, that last Sunday. I want to say it was the 28th, I think. I don't know if that's right.
Yeah, that sounds about right. So that would be about 6 months from the time.
Correct.
And initially everybody's like, okay, 2 weeks. Realistically, 2 weeks of not meeting seems like not that big of a deal. But when you're in the middle of you're 6 months out from launching, you're 2 months into the planting process. 2 weeks is almost an equivalent of 2 years in terms of the amount of relationships that can be built.
Yes.
So you immediately went to the internet. Shout out to digital ministry. You guys went to the internet. You're like, okay, let's try to keep this thing going. Keep the relationships going as much as possible. Keep checking in on people, all that kind of good stuff. And then when March 30th hits and the governor's saying, yeah, we still got probably another month to go.
Yep.
What was that leadership, the next leadership team meeting like? Because Easter was coming up mid of April. And now the governor has said, guess what? Nobody's going to be available for Easter services now. What's that team meeting like? Because you've got a new team, probably. I don't know the full extent of your dynamics there, but most of the time it's a team that maybe one other person has a ministry background, but for the most part, it's just, we've got a heart for this community, and so we want to be a part of it. Mr. Football Coach, what's your halftime speech at that next leadership meeting?
Yeah, and you nailed it. We had a guy who had served as an elder in previous churches. It was heavily involved in Westerville Christian, our sending church, and he could preach and teach and understood discipleship. But everybody else are just people who are wanting to serve, and of course, no one's planted. And so we went back. First, I got approval from my leadership here at Westerville saying, "What if we planted online?" At that point in time, it was all new and fresh. And everybody thought this would at least keep the momentum going. Didn't know all the ramifications of that. And I'll talk more about that a bit later. But yeah, we're like, what if we picked Easter Sunday to launch a service online, and find different platforms that allowed us to pre-record, but have it send out as live. You know what I mean? And so at that point in time, the average person thought it was actually live, but it wasn't. But of course, it helped us to kind of control things a bit easier. And so, just began asking around for different options and landed on some, programs that would allow us to do just that. Get my iPhone, put it on a tripod in my living room, and have my wife help run that, and my kids ran my slides. And again, because of my network, I was able to get some people who are worship leaders to give me some resources of them, because they were doing the same thing for their churches. And so it was casting this vision to our launch team, saying, we feel like God gave us this vision, and not just our church, but Westerville wants to plant 3 churches in 5 years and doesn't feel called to step away from that. We got to keep this thing going. Again, not knowing if it would only be a month or 2. And so we did just that. We launched online, with online chat hosts, and we did the Facebook thing, the YouTube thing, our website. My wife handles all that stuff there. And we made a church service online. And that's how we launched.
So, for those of you that need to see this for what it is in a little bit more of a clear picture, you're hired in December, January, December 19, January 20, somewhere in there.
Yeah.
You pick your spot around February. You have your team assembled probably end of February, beginning of March.
Yeah, we had been meeting, I'd say mid-February. So we had met probably 3 times or so.
So you've been a launch team for a month.
Yeah.
Everything shuts down, and so you're now keeping everybody just moving along. And then within a month of that, the church is born.
Correct.
So in 4 months, you went through the entire church planning process without really ever actually meeting in person one time.
You're exactly right. Yeah, it changed dramatically, but that's exactly our flow.
Yeah. So we're gonna really jump into this and dissect it, because there's a lot of good stuff in this. There's some theological stuff that Dan, I want to kind of break down out of this whole thing for people. But we need to take a quick break, and then we will be right back and jump straight into this. You could really call it nightmare, but a very good nightmare. So yeah. We'll be right back. This episode of the Ministry Misfits podcast and this awesome shirt are brought to you by Courageous Clothing Company. Courageous Clothing Company is a Christian family-owned business that specializes in custom designs that they create, as well as bulk screen printing of your custom designs as well. When you buy from Courageous Clothing Company, you're not just buying an awesome shirt, you also are helping spread the gospel across the world through the missions that they support, such as this here with Ministry Misfits, as well as with their own designs that have Christian-themed messages, sharing the gospel in an awesome and relevant way, or as we say within CSRM and Ministry Misfits, strategically relevant evangelism. Check out their entire line at courageousclothingcompany.com. All right, welcome back to the Mystery Misfits podcast. I am still here with, at this point, some of you are probably thinking, crazy man, Dan Stoffer. So, well, you said my name wrong last time, so I can say your name wrong this time. Dan Stoffer.
There you go.
And we just heard about the crazy, first quarter of 2020 for him and his family and his team. You guys have established your church. You guys are online Easter Sunday for the first time. During this time also, we didn't touch on this, but it's worth noting, this is also when you come online with CSRM and your role as the church resource director. And as you start to work through a couple of these different things, you get involved with CSRM in the Tuesday talks. You pitched to us the small church initiative. This is also when, for those of you that are interested, this is when Greg and I started our talks about Overwhelming Victory Radio. The community that you were in and that I was in was very much in a, okay, let's actually use this time. Let's not just, this isn't just a sit back and see what happens. This is we get to change, we get to decide what the field looks like now kind of moment. So, this is where our podcasting kind of expanded, and we put OVF to the side for a little bit and just focused on podcasting. You started the small church initiative for us here at CSRM. And you're starting to get somewhat of a feel, by the summertime of what the response is to actually having a new church that has only met online. What kind of numbers, not that numbers are the main thing, but what was the feedback? What were the numbers showing as far as your decision to launch 5 months early and without actually seeing anybody?
Yeah, and what's cool about that is it mimics what you would see in a traditional church launch, right? So that first Sunday, I want to say we had over 100 devices connected, and there, some of those are well-wishers, some of those are people in my own network, and then as the weeks kind of went on, that kind of shrunk down. I'd say, we would see, just under 200 views on Facebook, and 20 some on YouTube, and maybe another 20 on our website, and it kind of landed there. But from there, what we were able to see is really who are our core people, and so we would see certain people hit our radar. We did, of course, open up online giving, which certainly would help our church to go forward. Even though we weren't, renting a facility yet, and we'll talk about that a bit more in the future here. But we open up online giving. We see people hitting our radar. We do the online chat features, all that kind of stuff. We have people filling out our online digital connect card. And so we were operating like I knew how to operate a physical church online. And then from there, continuing to have, Zoom meetings with my launch team. We did some trainings for small groups, and we said, hey, Zoom's a great way to run a small group. You can still do it. It's a great resource. We leveraged Right Now Media, if you're familiar with that. It's like the Christian Netflix for Bible studies. And again, a different approach. Instead of just, going to someone's house, it's everybody logs in. And we had hosted kind of we called it a seed group. We wanted to plant seeds for our launch team so my wife and I, we modeled a small group. We did training, and I think that lasted 8 weeks. And then from there, they launched into small groups as well. And we've had 4 rounds, but we're about to start our 4th round of small groups ever since. And those groups, they meet for 8 weeks with the idea of they multiply. And so a leader has been trained to raise up another leader. Then hopefully we're not splitting groups, but we're multiplying. And the majority of those groups, even now, meet online. There are some benefits. Nothing beats face-to-face. I think we all know that. But for people who are busy, and maybe don't have time to clean up their house, or they're still concerned about some of the pandemic stuff, and we encourage people with their comfort level and to be smart and safe and all that. But I don't see the online group option going anywhere. And I don't see the online option for worship going anywhere for a worship service on Sunday morning, because even when we've met in person, we've had that option also. And so we've kind of built our ministry around 4 key principles of our strategy, which we find in Acts chapter 2, 42 through 47. We gather in worship. And so we don't necessarily see that word gather, but we see the first church gathering daily, actually, right? We talk about growing in community, and the best place to do that is in a small group. We talk about giving generously of our time by serving, and we've had a few service projects here and there where people are able to donate locally through a great organization in the community we're looking to plant. So we're building that relationship there. And of course, give generally of their resources financially to help us move forward as a church. And then we encourage people to go and multiply other followers of Jesus. And that could be as simple as you share a post, you share our service. Mm-hmm. It opens a door for you to be able to share the gospel. And so we've kind of built our church around those 4 things, which you can do online as well. So,
and want to clarify one thing. When he says that they weren't going anywhere, he meant that he wasn't getting rid of them, not that they weren't headed in the right direction.
There you go.
That's the exact opposite of what he was trying to say. You know, this is one of those things, and this is where, you know, we want to kind of sit for a little bit and talk is, you know, whether it's a generational thing or a church culture thing or an American culture thing, this is part of the discussion that I know you and I have had with a few churches. I know Dr. Linville has had this discussion with a few churches as well, of churches that are very much saying, you know, Facebook was good for a time, but, you know, you can't have church online. You know, there's no physical connection. There's no discipleship going on. There's no this, there's no that. You know, every once in a while you hear the internet is the devil, you know, comment. But this is something that, you know, those of you that have been listening, you know, the first time I showed up in front of the camera instead of off the camera was talking technology and ministry on the CSRM podcast. This is something that we here at CSRM have kind of been trying to be at the forefront for a while as far as this idea of digital ministry. You know, this was something that I don't even know if you were even aware of that when you joined us, but, you know, the timing was very good that we have, right as everybody is having to go online, we bring in a new church resource guy who is doing everything online. You know, give us your insight on this, because everybody has heard mine for the most part, and then I'll give it again anyway. But you know, where do you see online church, online ministry in terms of the overall picture of ministry?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's going anywhere. And again, we don't need to be afraid of it. I think we need to be aware of some of the negative sides of it, for sure. Right? There's things I don't agree with some social media platforms and their reach and all that, but we can use it as a tool. Right? Methods change, the message does not change. And during the pandemic, I think you said it earlier, we didn't want to sit around. We had people who are afraid. We have people who are confused. There was, you know, a lot of crazy stuff happening in our country. There still is a lot of unrest, and we need to get the gospel out there. The gospel is what changes things. The gospel is what provides hope. And Jesus said, well, once we get the gospel out to everyone, well, then he'll come back. So if we can help with that, let's do it, right? And so I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I think it's going to be a both and. I think most people would probably recognize that nothing beats being in the physical presence of people. But if this is a way to continue to reach people and to do ministry, especially in the middle of a pandemic, or you know, people who even naturally could not come because they're shut in for whatever reason, it could be a disability, it could be a mental illness or whatever, it allows you to take church to people. And what I love about the idea of churches having elements like this, whether it be a sports ministry thing that's online, a church service that's online. Some churches are doing the online campus and they've hired someone to oversee that thing, is it allows you to look like that Acts church. Like how many communities, little tiny house churches were meeting, whether it just be a family or a small group during the pandemic when it was at its worst. And in some states, there's still lockdown. So maybe this is working for you, where it's like, okay, we're bringing church to you and you're sitting around a table, you're sharing a meal, maybe you're having a conversation with your family. It sounds a lot like the Acts church. And so I think it's going to be a both and going forward, and there's a lot of resources that are inexpensive or even free that make it possible. And so you might not agree with everything you see with technology, but it can be a tool that can work for you.
And this is, a couple of things you just said there. This is part of why, we've already talked, episode 3, Dr. Linville came on and just laid out the full picture of the 3-tier paradigm of,
Yep.
Before we get to the method, we've got to look at the philosophy behind that method. And in order to understand that philosophy, we've got to look back to the theology behind it. That's part of why we're doing this podcast, is hopefully to be able to provide people with a theological understanding of the world around without you feeling like you've got to go to Harvard to understand it. The place to start, I think, that is, interesting, and you can speak this too, is that one of the areas that this kind of gets misrepresented, or that, it kind of gets downplayed, is the idea of your online campus, that thing we're just talking about, has to be treated in the same manner that your regular campus does. The people that are just watching you online are just as much your responsibility,
Yes.
you're accountable for, as the people in the pews. Dan, how many, just give us a rough estimate if you can, how many people consider you their pastor that you have never actually met?
Yeah, I would say there's got to be 20 to 30 people I've not met yet. We've had at our best in-person gathering, which was Easter. We're meeting once a month right now. We hope to increase that as the second half of this year comes. But we've had 65 there, and I'd say there's probably 20 people that I've not actually physically met yet. I keep seeing, their name pop up, or they like something, or they subscribe to our newsletter, or maybe they're in a different small group that I'm not leading. I tend to lead, or I'm a part of the men's group that happens on Saturday morning. And so there's opportunity there. Or there's some people who may never like or subscribe to anything, but because everything gets archived, like on YouTube, they're watching and they're a part of it, and maybe they are worshiping. And when the time is right, hopefully they will hit our radar, and we'll be happy to follow up. Of course, like a normal physical church, we've got policies and procedures of how to follow up and, plan for all that. But yeah, I'd say 20 to 30 people we've not physically met yet.
Yeah, and this is one of those areas that I haven't, one of these days we'll get around to actually just my story in general. But one of the things that we found when we were at a church in Cleveland that we were trying to help rebuild, it was very similar to your situation. You were talking about, kind of the Tampa and the Canton area, but I actually had more people that called me pastor that I had never met than the people that were actually in the building referred to me as their pastor, because of the fact that we treated our online community just as important as the people within the pews. Same thing, this is not you're just, trying to stick with the trends type of thing. This is gospel ministry. This is part of what, those of you that may be familiar with Brady Shear, he's the guy with Pro Church Tools. He one of the first things I ever heard him talk about was, when you look at world history, which we do a lot on this show, when you look at world history and you compare it with biblical history and church history, when you have the invention of the writing there in the, the way ancient times, is around the time that we also start seeing these, guys like Moses starting to write this stuff down. He's educated by the Egyptians to learn how to write. And so he writes all this stuff down so we have a record of it. Going into more modern era times, why is it that we always see Jesus on a mountain or in a boat? Because that was the microphone of the time. He sat there in the boat. It was amplified by the water, and then the reverb from the mountains fed it back to the people. He was using the technology of his day, even though we don't look at it as technology. The next big thing that you mentioned, the printing press, the first thing that's on it is the Bible.
Yep.
500 years later, the next big thing that's come up technologically is the internet.
Yep.
But for some reason, in those 500 years since the printing press, we've sort of lost our heritage and history of taking technology and using it. I am sure that, and even some of you listening probably are attending, there are probably still some churches that have all of their records on a floppy disk. Would you say that's unrealistic, Dan?
It's not. I would venture to say that's definitely true. Yep.
Yeah. We are afraid of technology all of a sudden, but we do not have to be. And theologically, this is something Dr. Linville covers a lot in, I believe it's the Christmanship book, as well as the Fundamentals book with the paradigms. Things are not necessary, things cannot be evil in themselves. It's the way that we use them that are evil. It's the way that we apply them that are evil. It's the way that we think about them that are evil. Obviously, like we said, there are some bad things on the internet, which is all the more reason why we need more people out there doing this kind of stuff and providing light in these dark areas. That's a whole tangent that, like I said, most of you have heard it before if you've been following us for a while, but guess what? You're stuck with it now because Dr. Linville gave me my own microphone. So, that's one area that we want to address is this idea of you do not have to be afraid of technology as long as you're not either one, abandoning the people you've got in front of you, and two, as long as you're taking care of the people that are listening.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, Dan, you were talking about, you guys have been successful in that you guys are almost to your year mark now.
Yep. Actually, yesterday. Yeah, it was 1 year yesterday. Yep.
I was thinking it was the 15th for some reason, but yeah. So yesterday, April 12th. So now you know when we were recording this. Yesterday, April 12th was your 1 year anniversary, which means that you already have made it longer than some church plants ever do. That plant in a traditional manner. And yet you've only had probably 10, 12 in-person gatherings?
I think it's less than that, Andrew. I want to say 6 or 7. Yeah. Yeah.
And on top of that, you guys have also started more small groups in that time period.
Correct.
It is definitely doable for you to be able to do this stuff online. It is definitely doable as long as you are willing to, again, using our theological framework, if you're willing to recognize this as God's gift, if you are able to think about how this can be used going into that level 2 philosophical, and then if you are willing to learn how to apply it, this is something that not only is going to benefit your church, it's going to benefit other churches. It's going to benefit other people. When I was, we'll flip the role here a little bit. When I was in Ohio preaching, I had actually a couple consistent followers in Florida that were listening consistently.
Wow.
The church that I'm currently at, 3rd Street, when they first launched online, during the pandemic, they had people listening in other countries.
It's crazy.
That now are a part of this church that they never would have been able to minister to otherwise.
Yep.
These are the kind of things we want to get you thinking about, but we want to take this one other direction. And this is, we've got about 5-10 minutes here that we're going to end this on. The two of us aren't just on here talking about this because Dan's done it and that because I've been a big pusher of it. This is also something that the two of us specifically are wanting to be able to let you know that if you are interested in this, whether you're interested in this as the senior pastor, as the sports minister, as the youth pastor, even as just somebody that's saying, hey, I want to get connected with somebody, we are the two, at least within CSRM, to talk to. I serve as the director of digital resources, and we can help you with consultations doing this stuff. we've launched 3 or 4 podcasts since this time last year.
Yep.
We've got 2 more that are in the works. We've expanded our YouTube library. I don't even know how big we've expanded it. All this kind of stuff. We want to be here to help you do that. Like we said last episode, also, we've got the Agone Institute we can get you hooked up in and connected with if you want to study this from a more academic standpoint. But Dan, also, you serve currently within CSRM as the Director of Church Relations.
Yeah.
And specifically the thing you started, which again, it's been about a year since you kind of launched this initiative, is our small church initiative. So give us a little bit of information about that.
Yeah. And pre-COVID, that was a church by definition of less than 250. We at CSRM have a heart for churches of all sizes, but especially for those that maybe don't have a ton of resources, maybe don't have a full-time paid person who's over a sports ministry, maybe don't have a facility with a gym or a lot of space for soccer fields. And basically, we just want to help. I'll use the term coaching, consulting. We want to encourage you, anything we can do, because we're really focused on resourcing and relationships, and we have both of that. No one understands a minister or a pastor, director, volunteer, whatever your title is, like someone who's doing just that. And so, like Andrew just shared, that's our heart for everybody associated with us. We just want to be able to help. And so, yeah, I've had some conversations with people who are just like, hey, we want to start something brand new. There was a guy I talked with out in California last week, and he loves beach volleyball because in California you can play that pretty much year round, especially in San Diego.
That must be nice.
Yeah, that's a little bit different than what we experience. And his church has room, and he's feeling that call that we talked about in one of the previous episodes. He didn't go to school to be a pastor, and we're talking about, well, CSRM can help you with that. We can get you credentialed to do just that. And then he's like, well, I'm thinking about joining staff as one of our janitors. And I'm just encouraging this guy to begin something, to take to his leadership, to get their stamp on it, and whatever we can do to help that. I helped another church here in the Columbus area who currently is meeting in an athletic facility for their worship, but the whole facility is now for sale. And they're talking about, hey, if we could, and they're at less than 200, if we could not only worship here, but operate this entire center 6 other days of the week, because we encourage them, as one of our philosophies at CSRM, to not meet on the Lord's Day for sports ministry. But to run this great, amazing facility in order to reach people. And so we just talked about some different options to make that happen, and also to have it fund itself to take the pressure off of trying to pay a mortgage and all that good stuff, because there are ways. And so those are just 2 examples of opportunities that not just me, but Andrew could talk to you about technology and sports ministry, being a pastor. I know maybe in the future we're going to talk about turnaround situations, because I think Andrew, both you and I have experience there. But that's really what we're about. No one understands what you're going through, like people who are going through it or who have been through it. And we just want to help you. So again, whether you're a church of 250 or less, or church of any size, but we really wanted to focus on those that maybe don't know where to start or don't feel like they have what some mega churches have. We're just here for you. And that would be my message.
And that really is the message overall of what, we're getting at, even doing this whole Ministry Misfit series, is the fact that nobody understands what you're dealing with unless they are dealing with it also. Ministry is a beast that nobody expects it when they go into it. They really don't prepare you for it while training you in college. And with unless you're talking to people that have been there, and even sometimes still when you're talking to people that have been there, it's something that it can be very isolating, very lonely when people don't understand what's going on. That's part of why CSRM and Overwhelming Victory are wanting to start this other, this is not the traditional thing you see for CSRM. This is a little bit different, but we want it to be something that is encouraging and for people to be able to grab a hold of and be able to use as an encouragement for them in their ministries, or for those of you trying to head that direction. Again, the small church initiative is one area that we're doing that. Our digital consultations is one way that we're doing that. Our general church or sports ministry consultations is another way. Internationally, we're able to even help. We've done some church planting, resourcing opportunities as well. That's part of why we've got church planners coming into the Ministry Misfits podcast. We want to be here for you. We want to be here to help you. If you have some of these things that you don't necessarily want to talk to us directly about, but these are things that you want to hear about, comment, send us an email, contact us, tweet me something. We'll find somebody in that area, and we'll talk about it. We want to be there. Again, those of you, Dan, I'm glad we were finally able to do this.
Yeah.
Give the name. I've flashed it up a couple of times on the screen, but give everybody the name of your church, and if they want to check you out Sunday, or since it's online, any other day of the week, give us the church's contact information here.
Yeah. So it's called Multiply Christian Church, and we are looking to plant in Gahanna, Ohio. I've already started that process. Obviously, the reason why I wanted to give you our location, I think there's some other multiplies. But the reason why we went with Multiply, we want to multiply the hope of Jesus in our community and in our world. And also we want to be a church that multiplies. We want to be a church that plants churches and plants small groups and plants leaders and all that good stuff. And you can find us at Multiply 614, which is the area code of where we're looking to plant.com. We go live or pre-recorded sometimes Sundays at 9:30. And we have a Facebook page, and we have a YouTube channel, and our website already gave that. Those are ways for you to kind of engage. If you by chance are listening to this and you're in the Columbus area and you don't have a church home, we would love for you to come out when we meet in person. You can find out those dates on our website as well.
Yeah, and for those of you interested in getting a hold of Dan in the CSRM role, you can contact him through our website at csrm.org. If you go to our leadership page, his contact information is there, as well as mine in the CSRM capacity. For those of you that would be interested either in the small church initiative stuff and just general consultation, if you're interested in the digital consultation, those of you that are interested in the credentialing, my recommendation would actually be to, when you go to that page, go and contact either Dr. Linville or David Waddell, who kind of head up that area for us a little bit more. But Dan, thanks for coming on. We'll have you back on because you and I've got a few other things that we want to throw around and tackle. The rest of you, we hope you will be back in next week. We've got some exciting stuff coming up. So subscribe, follow, give us 5 stars, share it, give us a review. Even a negative review will be helpful. So, if you feel like trolling us, feel free, but just remember that God's watching. So we will see you all next time. The Ministry Misfits podcast is a production of Overwhelming Victory Flicks, Overwhelming Victory Radio, and Ministry Misfit Media. Dr. Greg Linville and Andrew Fouts are our executive producers. Our theme music is entitled Rain and provided by Morning Light Music. For more information about Overwhelming Victory, visit overwhelmingvictory.org. For more information on CSRM, visit csrm.org. If you are interested in listening to our sister podcasts on the Overwhelming Victory Radio Network, visit overwhelmingvictory.org/OV Radio. If you're interested in contacting Ministry Misfit Media or have your own story to share, you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Ministry Misfit, or email us at ministrymisfitmedia@gmail.com.